So we firstly talk about what is appeasement policy, and then we talk about why they adopted appeasement policy. So next part, we're going to talk about some examples on how they appeased Germany, Italy, and Japan. Firstly, for Germany, the Munich Agreement. It's the time from the source we just read about the arrangement for Czechoslovakia when Germany they started to expand to Czechoslovakia. So in 1938, Germany threatened to take the Sudetenland and Czechoslovakia. Sudetenland is here. You can see it in this purple area. It was a part of Czechoslovakia. In Sudetenland, because a lot of people, they were Germans. That's the reason why Hitler used this as an excuse to expand to Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia. And in September 1938, Chamberlain, the British Prime Minister, he himself paid a visit to Germany and reached the Munich Agreement. So you can see, finally the Prime Minister of Britain, the Neville Chamberlain, he chose to talk with them in the Munich Conference, right? And they reached the Munich Agreement, which allowing So finally, they gave Sudetenland to Germany in hope of bringing peace to Europe and allow them to occupy Sudetenland. Maybe from here, you may see that British, they're so weak, and it's not a negotiation, it's like a celebration for Germany to have Sudetenland, right? But you have to see, actually, in the conference, Hitler, he brought up a very promising speech. He said that the Sudetenland is the last problem that must be solved, and it will be solved. Since the Germans live in Sudetenland, it is the last territory claim which I have to make in Europe. So you can see, so what it's trying to say is, if you let me have Sudetenland, I won't take another place since it's the last territory claim which I have to make in Europe, right? So now you may understand why Chamberlain can let Hitler let Germany have Sudetenland, since they promise it will be their last land, and for themselves, they don't really have like a great power to defeat Germany in a short time. That is the reason why they think this is like a good deal for them to let Hitler have Sudetenland, and on the other hand, to stop them from expanding to all other countries, right? Like here, the appeaser, Neville Chamberlain. If they have the Twitter, then fine, you can have another country if you promise just take one. But it turns out that Hitler, he was a fraud, and he lied about it. So the result is, it turned out that the appeasement policy only encouraged ambitious. Hitler broke his promise by invading the rest of Czechoslovakia and Poland in March and September in 1939 respectively, and Second World War broke out. So you can see Chamberlain, the only thing he can do is to like cry why he believed in such a fraud, right? So firstly, Sudetenland, and then the whole Czechoslovakia, and then Poland, and then Second World War, right? So this is about how they appeased Germany in Munich Agreement. So next, for Italy, the Abyssinian Crisis. So when Italy, they sent their troops to invade Abyssinia, Abyssinia directly called Britain and France for help. But instead of helping them to stop the invasion from Italy, actually, Britain and France, they appeased Italy by asking Abyssinia to cede 2/3 of its territory to Italy in order to peacefully resolve the crisis. You can see here the French Prime Minister signing a treaty which outlined the terms by which Abyssinia was to cede a large portion of its territory to fascist Italy. So you may see how the whole settlement can be so illogical, right? Because this is a Prime Minister from France. He is signing a treaty to let Italy to have Abyssinia. I think at least it should be Abyssinian's Prime Minister or leader to sign the treaty, right? So they don't really give them like any chance to negotiate for these things. So this is a British cartoon published in 1935. The Santa Claus represents Britain and France, and the man who has been kidnapped is the Emperor of Abyssinia. Santa Claus comes to Mussolini. This is a time when Britain and France, they try to give Mussolini the emperor of Abyssinia as a Christmas gift, right? They plan to sacrifice Abyssinia in order to appease Italy. And you can see in this picture, Abyssinians, they're paying tribute to, this is, maybe you can't believe it, but this is Mussolini, right? So they are paying tribute to Mussolini after their country had been annexed by Italy. Actually, same thing happened for Japan. They also appeased Japan in China, the Manchurian Crisis, the Manchukuo Crisis. Firstly, when they invade in Shenyang, Chiang Kai-shek, he directly called the League of Nations. And you have to see Britain and France, they were the most important member in the League of Nations, since US, they didn't join the League of Nations, right? So China appealed to the League of Nations. So for League of Nations, it cost them a year to reply. And they confirmed that yes, Japan had acted and unlawful, and Manchukuo should be returned to China. And they greatly denounced about Japan, their aggressions. But instead of leaving China, actually Japan, their action was to further invade to China in 1933. They invade more, and they finally resigned. They withdrew from the League of Nations in March 1933. So we talk about these three examples about how they appeased Germany, appeased Italy in Abyssinian Crisis, and appeased Japan in Manchukuo Crisis, right? So if we need to conclude about the result of the appeasement policy, it's very obvious that it only encouraged the ambitions of the aggressors. After Munich Agreement, Germany soon occupied the whole Czechoslovakia, then Poland, and the Second World War started. So I have a question for you now. Was appeasement policy the right policy or the wrong policy? Maybe most of you will think that this is like absolutely not right? It was wrong because it encouraged Hitler. We already see the results from it, right? It simply encouraged Hitler's gambling. They claimed that if Britain or France had squared up to him at the start, he would have backed off, so peace would have been secured. But you have to know another part of this decision making about the time when Hitler remilitarized Germany. You can see, actually, this is like in January 1938 and August 1939, the power of Germany and Britain. They largely surpassed Britain, right? So even for the naval power, they almost catch up with a little, right? And also you can see the aircrafts. Germany at that time, they had the strongest air force around the world. So for me, after we find out these data, I don't think like it is possible for Britain to start a war or use some like tough way to stop the aggressions of Hitler. Chamberlain's defenders say it was the only policy available to him. To face up to Hitler's, Chamberlain had to be prepared to take Britain into a war. At that time, especially in the Munich Agreement, while Hitler said that the Sudetenland is the last territorial place they will claim, I think at that time, Chamberlain, when it compares the two results, of course, to appease them is a better result, right? And also important countries like the US was against it when they adopted the isolationist policy, and also US really don't want Europe to start another world war, right? So most importantly, Britain's armed force were not ready, and they were badly equipped and had fallen far behind the Germans, especially compared to the army, the on-land force, right? So you may make your own decision. If we see the results, of course, it's a total failure, right? But if you see what happened at that time, it seems to be the only choice. So do you think appeasement policy is the right policy? The attitude of US and USSR. After the Great Depression, they adopted the isolationist policy. Remember this term and use it in your answers, okay? And avoid involvement in European affairs. You can see this is actually It is actually a cover of a music score titled I Didn't Raise My Boy to Be a Soldier in US. So you can say at that time, people in US, they really don't want to involve in another war or involve in European conflicts, right? Then how about USSR? It can be like very tricky at that time. If you were Stalin, will you support Hitler or you will support the European countries? You have to know that you're the neighboring country of Germany, right? So actually, at the start, the USSR, they intended to cooperate with Britain and France to restrain Germany. Because as you know, Hitler actually, he adopted the anti-communist policy, right? So as the first communist country in the world in history, of course, they should not cooperate with a country who was under the anti-communist policy, right? But in return, the attitude of Britain and France is they were unwilling to ally with the USSR because they fear of communism. So actually, for Britain and France, another part of the reason why they adopted the appeasement policy for Germany is the time when they tried to use Germany as a buffer zone for the expansion of communism from USSR. So they are using Germany to block the spread of communism from USSR because actually no matter in Britain or in France, there were rising of communist party. So in order not to turn their country into a communist country, they need Germany to be located in between them and the Soviet Union, right? You can see Germany is here and Britain and France, so it can be played a very good part as a buffer zone for the spread of communism from USSR. And actually USSR, they find out this. Britain and France are powerless to stop Hitler. They just keep appeasing him instead of stopping him, right? So, or they actually happy for Hitler to take over Eastern Europe because you can see after they have Czechoslovakia, Austria, and Hungary, and then Poland, of course, their next target should be USSR. So maybe they're actually very happy about the time when Hitler tried to take over Eastern Europe and then USSR. So maybe I need to take action before Hitler really expand to our country. So what Stalin did is he turned his attitude to the opposite while he tried to seek cooperation and negotiation with Hitler. After numerous failed negotiations with Britain and France and USSR, they signed the Nazi-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact with Germany in August 1939. So why the pact they signed? Pact just means agreement. So why the pact they signed named as Nazi-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact? Firstly, of course, it's because it's the collaboration between Nazi Germany and Soviet Union, the USSR, right? On the other hand, this is about non-aggression. It means they promise actually Germany and Soviet Union they not to attack each other within 10 years. And more importantly, not only that they were not going to attack each other, it's also about the time when they agreed to divide Poland between themselves. You can see in this map that since the East Prussia was separated from the mainland of Germany, that's the reason why they desperately want Poland. But why they didn't invade in Poland first is because the other side of Poland is USSR. They're afraid that USSR, since they were under the rules of Stalin, their military force can be like unpredictable, right? So for Hitler, he don't really want to take the risk to invade in Poland first. But when Stalin find him and tell him to sign this kind of treaty while they can separate Poland together, divide Poland together, of course, it can be the best deal for Hitler. On one hand, now the mainland can connect to East Prussia. Secondly, they can have a large part of Poland, right? So this actually encouraged Germany to march its troops into Poland. And when they invade in Poland, Britain and France they decide to take actions to stop his aggression. And the Second World War started. So you can see in this cartoon, a 1939 cartoon entitled Wonder How Long the Honeymoon Will Last. Firstly, name the countries represented by the two men, the cartoon. On one side, we have the Hitler, right? And this is Stalin. So Germany and USSR, or Soviet Union. And then what was the cartoon's view on the marriage? It seems to be a happy ending, but if the title was Wonder How Long the Honeymoon Will Last, that means actually his attitude is like very doubtful about the length of their marriage or honeymoon, right? So show that how the suspicious attitude towards the marriage. Marriage actually here means the Nazi-Soviet non-aggression pact. And you have to know the Nazi-Soviet non-aggression pact can be the trigger for the Second World War, because Second World War happened a week after they signed the Nazi-Soviet non-aggression pact. So, in the next video, we're going to talk about the course of the Second World War. See you in the next video.